Okay, we're going to play a little game here called Duck, 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 Goose. Only it's Duck, 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 Swan this time. And Duck, 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 birds in history and their connections. And as usual, I get to say my moniker before I even begin on this one. Goes back much, much earlier than previously thought. Now, a wing bone that they have found in a burial in Tel Aviv area in Israel indicates Swan shamanism could be 420,000 years old. And there seems to be a battle of these caves for Jebel Irud, showing as they dig deeper and deeper, older and older humans. And in this area connection too, for I've done a video last year about it and stuff that they had found in earlier finds and that connected to the Proto-Canaanites. And now we're not talking about that anymore, guys, at all. It goes back much earlier than people previously gave any heed possibly to. So let's read into this. The idea that the human soul might take the form of a swan to journey from this world to the next could be one of the oldest fundamental beliefs of humankind, or to suggest a new discovery from the 420,000-year-old cave site of Quesim near Tel Aviv, Israel. Now, I've talked before and recently even about shamanistic past where these shamans had a cowl made completely of bird feathers and bird skulls all on it up in Proto Indo Europeans. And I've made connections during that video and a few other. Man, I'll try to look it up and put it down in the first comments so you can check it out too, because it's gone too far for me to be able to link it anymore up as one of the next videos. But this idea of bird shamanism and things I've shown in the earliest of cave arts and things, where you have this Jacob's ladder situation and these birds and a body put up on a dais and allowed to be eaten by the birds to where all that's left is the bone, the meat taken away and taken to heaven, and they take your body to heaven. But there are certain symbolism that's been going on with this, and it goes back many, many tens of thousands of years. I've even done a video, which he's going to talk about here in a moment, about 24,000 years ago, and that connection and that cave art. We can also see ideas that are found in the Sumerians that have the same idea, and Inanna and the doves and the tale of Gilgamesh, and whenever Enkidus is about to die and that he had become a bird, right, and was let loose from a box at the very end of it, right, recanting something like he was a dove. And so this belief of animism of people that are very much like angels who get their wings, and people that have grown into modern society have a totally different idea on this, but same, variation on a theme, same, no different. The author here tells you in 2006 he wrote a book entitled The Cygnus Mystery, and man, I wish I'd read it. I must have to look it up now. It proposed that humanity's belief in the soul transforming into a bird at death has since time immemorial been focused around the key of animistic forms in a certain area of the night sky. And yeah, man, I could have a conversation with this guy. Key to these ideas was the swan, connected not to just with shamanism and animism for the last 25,000 years, or 24 like I showed you in the deal, but also arguably with cosmological beliefs surrounding the stars of Cygnus constellation and the Milky Way and its role as a road to the river of the afterlife. And this we can see in Egypt and in Samaria and everywhere as a part of a connective. So it must go back much earlier than that. In fact, like I showed swastikas are even in the U.S., and swastikas go back before the last ice age in humanity's past as a symbolism that they had, that it was known by everyone, and some of those everyone made it over into the Americas later. We're not going to talk about the Solutreans and all that hypothesis that comes out of it. Literally, they had that symbol. When I was a kid, the New Mexico signs, still some of them had the symbol onto it, where it was drawn in an arrowhead and it had it on it. We went to I think it was Hopi people, and this lady just literally pushed this antique on my mom of an ancient milk saucer bowl with a little pourer, and that pourer was a deep dark brown with an open spot that was blonde on it and a swastika in it. But that's neither here nor there. We're talking about birds, and just one point of this type of thing, but these birds and where they fly, and buzzards when they go way up in the air and would take the carry-on of life and where they're taking it to. If you follow me. Let's continue. This single swan bone. Now comes compelling evidence that the cult of the swan, as it'll probably be called here for a while, was most likely dating back not to 25,000 years or at places like we found Maálta Boy and so on, but 420,000 years. A staggering age. Way back. And this, of course, is not looked at as being from Homo sapiens, which Jebel Erud shows goes back now not a little over 200,000 years, but 312,000 years of anatomically modern humans, right? But this seemed to have been a hominid at this point before. For this predates that. And before we found the Jebel Erud site at that dating, it literally seemed too far out of reach. But now, 420 off 315 is not that much farther and closer in time, and a connection could be made from them to them. Eventually, we're going to find some other finds that connect over time, these two people. But we don't have a lot of it. We only have little bits, and amazingly there's a connective here, but it's not found here. It's found way up in Siberia, in between these two dates. And then back down here and over here, and then back up in Siberia 24,000 years ago, and back down here, and so on. And so does it have to do with Neanderthals, Denisovans, all those type things? Well, we'll get into it a little bit. Archaeologists working at the Quesem site, 12 kilometers or 7.5 miles outside of Tel Aviv in Israel, they have found a single swan bone, a carpo-metacarpal. So, in other words, an arm bone of it, a wing bone. Outside of Tel Aviv in Israel, they found a single swan bone that bears clear knife marks indicating that the bird's feathers were purposely removed for some type of specialistic usage, most obviously ritualistic in nature. Now, we as a people now think that perhaps that people liking feathers a whole lot, other than foo-foo people from the 60s and back to the 40s and ostrich feathers and quill pins back in the day. One recollection we still had of this same thing is American Indians and their headdresses. But if you look at ancient Egyptian art, they show you these Lybians, and they're pale and they're tattooed and stuff, but they have double plumes coming out of their hair. And the ancient Amerindians, though it's different in different societies, they're not all just one blanket or monolith, where a brave would come of age and get a feather. Whenever he became someone of note and importance, he would get another feather. But this king and the shaman would be the people that would have all of these feathers. And of course we know it's eagle feathers in that situation, but not always. But eagle feathers or falcon or hawk feathers. And we find that falcon and Horus, and that symbology running through all of these people. But the swan is different than a falcon. So there may be a dual aspect here, but let's just continue as we go into this. People used to use brightly feathered outfits quite a bit through the ages here. And feathers are still an extreme decoration, and it would also be a decoration of a shaman if they have this connective to the afterlife and gods and so on. And it's a conduit. Literally, a feather is a conduit to lift the veil between there and the gods of a cosmos, if you will, and this path to this heaven. And later quill pens are writing about such things too. These cut marks are found on the bone were considered to be from deliberate defeathering of the bone for some purpose. And there's more than this piece here that's shown, but just a section of it and stuff. But so curiously, this was the only swan bone found during excavations, even though the bones of many other birds were found to be present in greater quantities, suggesting that they were being eaten and their bones discarded. Yet, this hints strongly that the swan held some special place among the hominid occupants who identified remains are unclear. Like the shaman had this bird thing, and it wasn't going to be sparrows and crap that you ate. And it wasn't duck, 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 duck. But it was goose or swan. And its regalness and difference might have something to do with hierarchy, like hierarchy of birds. Like the king of the animals or beast is a lion, so that effigy is used in the master of beast, and pretty much if they whoop that ass, then everything below it becomes part of that situation. Deers don't have to be into question of that other than that point. And the same thing if you master that eagle, for the eagle is the lion of the birds. But then there's Mother Goose, right? And Mother Goose migrates her children, and that's ancient divination and augury that the Greeks and Romans are famous for utilizing birds. And if you don't think it's part of the Bible in any way, that same effigy where they used birds to find their way in boats and so on, and learn from the Phoenicians, believed in everything, they did the same thing when Noah releases a raven and then a dove and so on, exactly mimicking the ancient Sumerian story where they did the same, and birds in the same reign. And people have wondered why they do even the birds in that order. Well, a raven will find local, and if he can't find local, he comes back. Another bird will go up higher, like a dove, and he can also home, like homing, pigeons and so on, and will find land from a higher point in the sky and then head that way. And so if you just watch him from the crow's nest, you can see where he goes and follow him. And luckily he's right. For the raven might just check it out and come back and go, man, ain't nothing real close, I ain't gonna fly any longer. Whereas the other bird might take the longer, more difficult path to something that's more accessible. Coffee here, guys. In my skull mug. So, coming into the holidays here near Halloween. I don't know what time of year you're going to be watching this at, but if you're watching when it comes out right now, I'm going through Halloween themes and things like that too, and so we start to go into there. Then comes Christmas bugs. But let's continue. It hints at that, and so here you can see the dig insight and everything, and no, they didn't have the stairs at 400,000 years ago and the things built into it in the walls. These are just people doing excavations down into an area, into an exposed cave, and how they can get there. That's Qasim Cave near Tel Aviv, Israel, and it has occupation from 200,000 years ago, and we talked about that recently, and earlier finds in the higher levels that they found, but now even worse, or deeper, well, not worse, but deeper, farther, more. And just like Jebel El Rud, here's this competition on mankind, really. And man, I ought to do a video just on that and just show you the variations of what they found from each one. And I might do that eventually coming up. Put it on the list. The discovery of human-looking teeth at the Quesem site are similar to those found in association with hominin remains at other sites in the region. And this would be like, you know, Cro-Magnon. No. This is way back when. So this is the first remnants of things that are coming out of Homo erectus. And it's possible if they could find more of it, they might even find a link that they've been trying to forever. And the teeth show some kind of odd difference, but they don't go into that in this. This is just trying to make a connection in swans, really, if I can get to it. Quafes, for instance, close to it, suggests the presence in the Levant 400,000 years ago of individuals with clear features of anatomically modern humans. Not Homo sapiens, but anatomically modern humans. They predate at least 100,000 years the earliest confirmed remains of anatomically modern humans found at recent Jebel El Rud in Morocco, and thought to be around 312,000 years ago. So now there's a deep question, and of course they don't even have a good piece of the mandible and everything, but looking at these teeth and they go, man, it's so close in together. Are we going to say this is sapiens too? Or are we going to say that it is antecessor? Or what form are they going to try to attach to this? And eventually, if it's interesting, I'll do a video about it. Here they're showing some of the teeth that they had even found, right? That are here. Some of the enamel still intact. The rest of it is all calcified, right? What can be said is that the occupants of Quesem were not Homo erectus, though a link with early Denisovan groups who were known to have some modern human physiology and may have passed through the Levant en route to places like Siberia and Mongolia and perhaps the islands, remains a possibility. There are other possibilities that are thrown out. We don't need to discuss. It is now being proposed that Quesem may well be the earliest known site where our human predecessors meaningfully removed the feathers of birds. With the earliest known instance of feather removal after Quesem coming from Europe, this being among Neanderthals within the past 100,000 years. These facts are pointed out by Tel Aviv University's Ron Barkai, who, along with Ruth Blasco and Avi Gopher, of the same university, have just written a paper on this extraordinary discovery and its possible implications for understanding the origins of bird-related animism, which we still have today as the angels. For all of it's gone away is considered as being paganism, but somehow that one is totally kept. But it's the sign of Horus, and it was kept. And it's a sign in ancient Sumerian and Nana and everything, along with owls and so on, which we're about to get into, and it is kept. And the shamans from the Proto Indo Europeans, and it is kept. And even into Britain and the earliest finds and what they're talking about there, and it is kept. But there are other things that are kept too, like Halloween, like Christmas. But then again, they're the changing of the seasons and things that relate to those stories. But then again, when the birds change their direction, they give us divination. They tell us that the time's coming. And not that people back then weren't watching the stars and didn't have the calendar figured out and watched things, or at least these shamanistic people, and they knew these things that the other people didn't have to know. And here's the separation of that magic that controls things, and he knows. And hell, if he can tell you whenever a eclipse is coming up, man, that guy is smart. He gets a lot of control, huh? Yeah, because he can dictate what God's fixing to do. But that's another story entirely. When asked why the occupants of the Quesem cave might have removed feathers from a swan wing bone, Barkai answered, as he reported to Haaretz, it is apparently for cosmological or other ritual purposes. Maybe they thought that with the help of the feathers, they could gain the swan's characteristics, flight, and so on. If you ever watch the video of learning how to fly, he puts on these fake wings and tries to fly. The tales of Icarus. I've recently done one about the ancient sun and solar gods. and how Phaethon, and how the idea that he might have been a representation of an asteroid strike where somehow the sun came too close to the earth and so on, but before he had gone too far away and it had turned cold. Is this the last ice age and the Younger Dryas event and everything, or is it just some modern telling? Is it some weird swish on the fact of the Greeks talking about how people were more tanned in that area and darker, and some tale they had woven into that? Well, it looks like it actually might be all three. So it's a practice that Burkei and his colleagues think might well have persisted through time of the earliest pre-sapiens hominid of the Levant through the current day. What's she doing? Cosplay. I don't know who that is. Is that from Overwatch? That doesn't look like that she's supposed to be trying the girl from Overwatch. Well, she has too long a hair, but some girls aren't going to cut their hair off to try to look just like that girl. Anyhow, so this is where it's found in an area of Tel Aviv, El Paso, and stuff here in Revolt, Kesem Caves. So let's discuss a variation of theme on this, and we might get more understanding, for there's owls. Like when I was a kid, I watched the ancient Clash of the Titans, and the goddess imparted Perseus with Bubo, the owl of wisdom, and he helps out in the adventure quite a bit, and he becomes this comic thing too about it. But strangely enough, this owl of wisdom, and if you remember, they armored that owl. It's pretty wicked looking too whenever they did it. It's something that they animated by using the old animation method of stop motion and stuff, and that's some of that last of the Harryhausen type stuff, and the old skeleton armies and stuff, and Sinbad and all those things that went along with it. Let's continue. To prove the point about owls here, the authors of the new paper cite the fact that thousands of years ago in Louisiana, one indigenous tribe adopted animistic beliefs associated with the owl. To the owl people at Poverty Point, which I've mentioned in one of my videos, and they're a mound building culture that's different. Anyhow, they thrived at the area of circa 1750 all the way up until about 970 BCE. The bird became a key totem to them, as well as you see that on many bird totems, and of course this giant thunderbird they have and everything else, but this is different. Most likely associated with both a dead journey and the transmigration of the soul. The culture built huge earthworks that, it has been suggested, resemble the shape of an owl, while at the same time constructing an owl-shaped village. Owl figurines were also found in association with these people's settlements. And we can remember about Inanna and how she is shown as a winged, angelic creature, but with owl bird legs, right? And she has the two owls sitting next to her. She's on top and doing a Master of the Bee ceremony, but now they have become sullen. They weren't fighting her and she became master. It's after this fact she's got them sullen under below her feet. And of course, this on the top of an animal slowly changes to on the top of a chariot, as in the sun god riding across the sun. But chariots and horses come with another later culture, but it gets adopted in the same situation. But at one time, it was just this winged sun disk, right? And Horus is the god of the sun, Ra, and so on. And we can go through that whole, but I think the people listening get the gist of what I'm saying here. The owl was also seen among the Algonquin peoples of the Great Lakes, St. Lawrence River region, as well as some first people of the plains, as a psychopomp, a soul carrier of the soul accompanier, encountered by the human soul on the path leading to the next world. And there's another connection. Referring to the use of swan feathers and swan bones at Kesem Burka suggests that using swan feathers could have transformed them, the inhabitants that lived in this cave here, into swans, that they would use it in some type of ritual, right? I'm out of coffee and will need to make some more after the video here. This is a very striking statement, and one that strongly implies that swan animism is arguably one of the oldest forms of shamanism anywhere in the world, or this bird symbology, especially if you encompass it in a full sense. And as I've indicated many times before, of these deises and how they used to let the birds take the people away. and you come birds for something like that. And of course, now we start to see a picture of early South Americans and early Americans, Amerindians, if you will, and they're having a headdress, and the shamans having a headdress, the men having a plumed thing coming off of their tail. And we'll get into the picture here in just a moment. What's more, and as Berkay admits, it is probably related to both the cosmological ideas and the transformation of the soul into a bird at death, something that must have been common to early human groups from a very early stage. And why do you say that? Well, even people that came into the Americas have a common symbology with these other people. Well, they came across. Proto Indo Europeans had touch with them. They brought the swastika with them, and so on. And a lot of these beliefs that we're now finding were the earliest beliefs of even Caucasians and stuff. All the paganism thing has all been just wiped off the chalkboard. But if you look at a chalkboard, even though it's been wiped clean, you can still see some words, and if you get real good at it, you can start to pick out things of what was said before. This picture here shows a weird thing, and I've also seen this in a site about cannabis use in the Americas and so on. For what this shows is these people doing this bird dance around in a circle, right? And they're holding their little bird plume tail, and then they do a dance thing that goes along with it. And as they go around the circle, a shaman apparently is taking a peace pipe. And no, he's not doing a blowgun dart in their head. He's doing what's called shotgunning, where he has this reverse pipe and he's blowing back into their mouth smoke. He's in up here, which looks like a huge joint type thing, or maybe it's a horn with a hollowed out spot and he's smoking out of it, and you can see the smoke coming off of it, but you can definitely see he's blowing the smoke in this guy's face here as they go around in a circle, creating this ritual. And then they get high. Where does that expression come from? Is it just because the feeling makes you feel a little floaty somewhat, like alcohol or something? No. The expression comes back a long time ago. The name marijuana, actually, Mary, the Bible, and Juan, John. So, what? And, there's connections in this cannabis and these Canaanites. And, man, I went deep into it whenever I did a history of cannabis, and it shows that it goes back many tens of thousands of years, and of course much earlier than people thought. In fact, they used the hemp to make ropes, and quite a few famous paintings and all the ropes and canvases and things like that of quite a few ships were really just about cannabis. One famous one being the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria, and others like the Mayflower. But let's continue. So they wear coats of feathers during this ceremony, was the picture. These are universal things. It's primordial, he goes on to explain. Shamanism exists in all groups too. So does rock art. Altered states of consciousness exist in all groups and always relate to the relationship with the world. And altered states of consciousness goes along with this whole idea and being closer to God. Very clearly, Berkay suggested that swan transformations among hominin groups was not just universal in the past, but almost certainly involved individuals achieving altered states of consciousness, the most obvious explanation of why a shaman might adorn himself or her in the swan feathers to become a swan. And this is the shape-shifting concept idea where you can become a bird. If you've ever watched the Beastmaster, he could see through the eyes of a bird and know what he knew. And it's in Dungeons and Dragons, you use it as something like a familiar, and you can have a cat that you send out and he brings back, and you can see through his eyes at times and things like that. It's a way to kind of do that crystal ball of the Wizard of Oz and see what's going on, and then you can send out your flying monkeys. So let's talk about a Cygnus link, for this is an ancient and of the most ancient of zodiacal type signs or constellations. The question of the cosmological event to this very earliest form of swan shamanism can only but remain a speculation. We have no idea how these people are pre-sapiens communities living in the Levant 420,000 years ago might have perceived their relationship to the night sky. We can only try to connect it mentally with things that we know, and try to say, is it a continuation? And it's hard to link something 24,000 years ago with even something 7,000 years ago. But can you imagine trying to do it and say 24,000 years ago and 7 are questionable? You can see it, right? But here's one 420,000 years ago. Hey, same? Well, could it even be the same? And wouldn't it be remarkable if it was even similar, right? Because look at how much writing changed and all these things in short amount of time. Look what's changed in the last couple of thousand years with humanity itself, and then to look through a span of that time and see something that's very closely correlated might show something that's deep-rooted, so deep-rooted it's around you and surrounds you today with this angel animism idea, for it's only one of the few that are kept out of all of it. The constellation of Cygnus has been identified as a swan both in the Eurasian continent and North America. So we can be pretty sure that these beliefs predate the submergence of the Beringia land bridge and that connective, which linked the American continent with Asia through till around 10,500 years ago. And that date goes with that cometary strike and the destruction of the continental ice shelf and oh whooshy. And it kind of washed away the people who were here before, but they've confirmed now, yeah, there were people here before 16, 18, over 20,000 years ago. Mammoth bones at 130,000 years ago. Striked made flint objects at 200,000 years ago at the Calico dig site. But all of these are tried to shushed over because, see, it's this Clovis first. And America was the land of the dinosaurs until they showed up. Well, we figured out now those dinosaurs got wiped out real quick. And they blame it on the people that came later than they died. And that makes no sense whatsoever. What does make a correlation is not that the people that were here too before had done so, but a catastrophe caused the changing of the guard of both. So here's a picture of Cygnus, and it also has to do with Mother Goose and so on. Here's Le Renard, the fox, and the lyre, the dragon, and yeah, there's a 13th constellation too, an Ophiuchus, and a man with a lizard and thing, and oh, it goes with the whole tales about killing Yam, the god, and Cassiopeia up over there. And, oh, the hoofs of Pegasus. Pegasus. And the Milky Way runs right by it. So this is like leading into it. Here's a bird flying in. Here's the ducks flying to the north while they're doing, and so on. So let's look at that aspect. Thus the belief in a celestial swan associated with an area of the sky marked also by the presence of a distinctive fork in the Milky Way, seen since time immemorial as a road or a river, linking the physical world with the afterlife, almost certainly goes back to the Upper Paleolithic age, circa 45,000 to 11,600 years ago. If correct, then, these beliefs, as well as the practices associated with them, are probably linked with important cultural artifacts found at a site in southern central Siberia named Maálta. And we talked about the Maálta Boy, and he's just one anomaly at that site. These are others, which thrived on the Balaya River, a branch of the Angara River west of Lake Baikal, huge giant lake there, approximately 24,000 years ago. Here, archaeologists have unearthed 14 mammoth ivory bird pendants of straight-necked swans, some of the eye holes at one end, and almost like a needle, or a needle and thread type situation. And this, people have made all kinds of things. Well, okay, they poke it through the hole in the fabric, like they made an awl hole, and they poke it through. Then they thread a through through there, then they pull it back. And they might have been using this for an ancient pull thing, and they go, well, why do they have them in their burials at this certain way? And it doesn't make common sense to it. And then if they all had an eye hole, you could say, oh, this is like a needling kind of thing, or a way able to do patchwork or whatever, needlepoint or something like that for these people in some form of loomish making and stuff, but it doesn't have to do with that. So they have these eye holes at one end. They show swans in flight, although the bird's outstretched wings have been severely truncated. The other thing about the eye holes is that they're kind of drilled out, like all the beads were and things like that, and that shows you a level of technology that's going on in this simplistic little thing that most people don't attach to it. And if you'll look at this, ironically, they look like a drumstick. To me, it looks like if you were to just take and grab a hold of the bottom, that you could go doon 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 doon. And they look like modern drumsticks with a little drum head onto them. Not saying that they use these for shamanisms or drumsticks in any way, but it's entirely possible. Boy, you could throw 1,000 ideas that could have been possible. But ironically, they all have a lot of loops here at that other end that they're talking about. And so the eye hole that they would have at the end is more like a anus hole and not really at the front, but they do show dents at the eyes on quite a few of them too. So that's found at that Maálta site that we were talking about. And no, that's not the island of Malta. This is Maálta, really, like the archaic people. Significantly, 4 of these swan pendants, when uncovered, were found to be aligned north and south, as if it had some relevance to their placement. After due consideration, noted Russian paleoarchaeologist Anatoly Deverenko, I destroyed that, wrote that this deliberate north-south directionality of the swan pendants, along with the special attention paid to them by this Malta community, was found alongside a child burial, suggests a connection not only with the north-south migration of birds and divination that goes with that, but also with the universal idea that in death the human took the form of a bird. And somebody would say, oh, they used to think that. And it's like, man, we got angels today, and if you do right, you can get your wings and all of these things. Don't pretend it's something that's from long ago. It hasn't even tried to disappear like many other things have. Derevyanko also saw the existence of these swan pendants as a significant first appearance of animism in Siberia. In other words, here at Malta was profound evidence of our most distant ancestors' belief that the human soul could transform itself into a bird to achieve transmigration from this world into the next through the Milky Way. But there are older things of animism found, for there's the lion-headed creature. That's, that lion man that goes back at least 40,000 years ago. So we know from these same beliefs into transformation of the human soul into a swan almost certainly predate Malta's Upper Paleolithic community by as much as 400,000 years, though, now that it has connectives to that not 24,000 years ago, but almost 400,000 years over. We're 420, so we're 4,000 years short. 396,000 years. Whether or not there's a link to between the activities in the Quesem cave and those at the Siberian site of Malta around 24,000 years ago might never be established or satisfy everybody. It is, however, possible that these ideas were indeed carried eastward by pre-sapiens groups such as Denisovans or Neanderthals, or by our very earliest of ancestors. All we can say is with certainty right now is that the idea of human soul adopting the guise of a bird, the swan in particular, to the journey from this world to the next could be one of the oldest fundamental beliefs in humankind. And I hope you all become angels. I hope there is some way in truth of that, and maybe we make this incredible starship trip like it's the end of or not the end, but in the middle of Contact, where she flies to a new world and then lands on a place, and the primordials show up, but is one of her ancestors, so she understands it. We all dream of this type of thing, for that movie Contact was made by Carl Sagan. Amazingly, knowing his background and then what his beliefs are and what he learned, how he gleaned and made a video or a movie about such a thing. It's neat to watch. And it's got Jodie Foster in it, and it's got All Right, All Right, All Right in it too, as a not so man of the cloth. But, and there's a lot to that movie too. Anyhow, guys, just wanted to share this to you, in this connective idea that we still have to this day, and it still shows up even in our modern belief systems, and how far it goes back. For I quite often talk about almost like reaching in the far distance. I talk about it going through Sumerian and everything, which predates the Bible, and you can see its connectives. But other people all having this winged disc type thing and this deal that goes on it, later winged horses and so on. But it connects to an ancient belief system. But it looks like, yeah, way before 10,500 years ago, there was the connection that everybody knew this and had it. And some of those people made it in North America. They had that same idea. They carried the headdress and everything on further as the shamanistic people over in the old world gave way to all new modern beliefs. The Amerindians kind of stayed somewhat primitive, most of them. Anyhow, like, share, and subscribe and enjoy, and we'll go on to further connections of this in other videos, and maybe as we do, we'll look back on this and go, oh wow, so there's that connective too. For sometimes when I talk about these things, I just kind of give a quick mention to Maálta Boy or the swans and the bird thing. And if you haven't seen my other videos, then you may not make this huge connection of this swan bird thing. What's he talking about, 24,000 years ago? Well, now we're talking 400,000 years ago. So again, I guess I'll end with my current tag moniker. This shamanistic bird belief, which I've shown you goes back into the tens of thousands of years, apparently may go back as early as 400,000 BC, and actually much, much earlier than previously thought. Comment down below, hit that button, hit that bell. Peace.